Guilty on all 34 counts. That's the verdict reached in the New York trial of former President Donald Trump. Thank you for joining us. I'm Carlo Cicchetto.
And I'm Kirsten Holmes in for Marcella Lee. Judge Juan Merchan announced this verdict just hours ago. Donald J. Trump is now the first former president to become a convicted felon. This 5 months before the November election, where Trump is facing off against Joe Biden to be America's next president. CBS 8's Shannon Handy joins us live to break it all down for us. Shannon, whether you're for or against Trump, today's verdict is historic.
Yeah, Kirsten and Carlo, it certainly is. As you mentioned, this is the first time in U.S. history a former president has been convicted of a felony crime. We watched this trial for 6 weeks, yet it took the jury just 12 hours to deliberate. Here's what former President Trump had to say as he left the courtroom.
This was a disgrace. This was a rigged trial by a conflicted judge who was corrupt. It's a rigged trial, a disgrace. They wouldn't give us a venue change. We were at 5% or 6% in this district, in this area. This was a rigged, disgraceful trial. But the real verdict is going to be November 5th by the people. And they know what happened here, and everybody knows what happened here. You have a Soros-backed DA, and the whole thing. We didn't do a thing wrong. I'm a very innocent man, and it's okay. I'm fighting for our country. I'm fighting for our Constitution. Our whole country is being rigged right now. This was done by the Biden administration in order to wound or hurt an opponent, a political opponent. And I think it's just a disgrace. And we'll keep fighting. We'll fight till the end, and we'll win.
Trump was found guilty on all 34 counts related to falsifying business records. The jury sided with prosecutors who said that Trump authorized a plan to falsify checks and related records in an effort to prevent voters in 2016 from learning of an alleged sexual encounter with adult film star Stormy Daniels. Trump falsely recorded reimbursements he made to his former attorney, Michael Cohen, who had paid Daniels $130,000 for her silence, citing that money as legal expenses. Doing so is against New York State election law, which makes it a crime to promote the election of any person to office through unlawful means. Now, after the verdict, you can see here a crowd of people gathered in Times Square as the courthouse. They had a lot to say. We also heard from Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg. He thanked the jury and said despite Trump's criticism of him and the jury, everyone did their job.
While this defendant may be unlike any other in American history, we arrived at this trial and ultimately today at this verdict in the same manner as every other case that comes through the courtroom doors, by following the facts and the law and doing so without fear or favor.
As for the upcoming presidential election, we can't say if this verdict will impact the vote, but Trump is still allowed to run for president. His conviction does not change that. Sentencing is scheduled for July 11th, and his punishment will be decided by the judge. Carlo?
All right, thanks, Shannon. Joining us right now to talk about that verdict, to break it all down for us, both in legal and political terms, is Wendy Patrick. She's our legal and political analyst. Thank you for making time for us today. History being made today, not the kind any of us really want to see. But what's next here for Donald Trump? Can he still run? Shannon said he can still run. But what's going to happen with him?
Well, what's going to happen is no doubt he and his advisors are regrouping right now to talk about not whether he can run. Clearly, the law says that he can as a convicted felon and serve, by the way, if it comes to that. But they're talking about how do we go from here? What do we do with this verdict? We understand they're fundraising on it, as is the Biden campaign. Yeah. But more importantly, that July 11th sentencing date, how is that going to impact his run for president? Now, one thing Judge Merchan said that I think deserves a lot of credit is when there was this discussion about, well, travel restrictions, is there going to be any restriction on where he can go? Judge Merchan said he has no desire to interfere with him campaigning. This trial interfered with his campaigning, but they did it. And
Right.
they presented their evidence. The judge gave them the charge and they got a conviction. But between now and the time that the appeal, remember he's appealing and that's got to work its way through the court system, I don't know whether this judge has any desire to impede his ability to go out and do what any presidential candidate should be able to do, speak to the American voters.
Yeah, he seems to be trying to get himself out of that political process,
Yes, he
understanding
does.
the moment in time to be sure. When it comes to sentencing, though, I've read 4 years for every count. There's 34 counts, but up to 20 years maximum. What do we think is likely here? What is a former president likely to see for first conviction ever?
Right. Not that.
Yeah.
First of all, there's lots of times that judges will run sentences concurrently. So in
Sure.
other words, he may say, okay, max them out 4 years for all of them. I'm going to put them all together. But with these kinds of crimes, I think the bigger question is, would they routinely in that jurisdiction result in jail time?
Okay.
And if the answer is no, then they shouldn't for Donald Trump.
Right.
Now, many people are talking about the complications that would be involved if he were to go to jail because he has Secret Service that would go with him. But put all that aside, would it be fair to give him a different sentence, whether it's more or whether it's less, because of who he is?
Right.
That's one of the things this judge is going to have to decide.
Apply the law, whether it's for prison or not, whatever your standards are, be consistent with those, with who this person is, regardless of their status in
Right.
the United States. Okay, just politically, we know that this is not going to change minds at all for certain people. It will
right.
not move them. But there are some people, some Republicans, some independents, who have said in the past a conviction would change their mind. Do we really think it will?
Maybe not in these circumstances. Remember that a lot of voters were saying that when all 4 trials were pending. And this is the least serious of the 4. So I think some of those people that were surmising that, well, maybe if he's convicted, I'll change my mind, maybe not convicted of this. And more than that, like if he were to serve a sentence after the election and he were to win, what would that even look like? Would he be dragging an ankle monitor around the White House? What kind of travel restrictions can you put on somebody who's actually serving as president? All that is probably factoring into the voters' minds and thinking, does this really make a difference to us, or are we voting based on the kitchen table issues that voters usually default to, especially in hard economic times?
And we won't even really know until after the election, when we
Right.
talk to people after the exit polls, what made your final decision. Wendy Patrick, our political and legal analyst. It's going to be a wild ride. It already
Yes, it
was,
will.
but it's going to be a wild ride. We'll be checking with you
Fasten
a
your
lot,
seatbelt.
up until November. Thanks for being with
Thank
us today.
you.
In the meantime, reactions pouring in from all corners. Kirsten, what is the latest?
Okay, so President Biden's campaign released a statement minutes after Trump was convicted. They say, quote, "In New York today, we saw that no one is above the law. Donald Trump has always mistakenly believed he would never face consequences for breaking the law in his own personal gain. Convicted felon or not, Trump will be the Republican nominee for president." We're also hearing reactions from local politicians here in San Diego. Darrell Issa, a Republican representing the 48th congressional district, said, quote, "The Trump trial and verdict are a disgrace." Representative Scott Peters, a Democrat from the 50th district, said, quote, "Our legal system worked as intended." And Democrat Sarah Jacobs, who represents the 51st district, said, "Justice is served." Here at CBS 8, we are working for you. You can get the latest updates on this story and others sent straight to your phone by downloading our free CBS 8 app, or just go to our website, cbs8.com. Well, the battery fire burning at a storage facility in Otay Mesa continues to improve, and firefighters say they are cautiously optimistic they'll be able to wrap up this weekend. That fire started on May 15th. I talked with the last remaining firefighters who are on scene today to make sure the facility and surrounding areas are safe. Take a look.
They're assessing how many of the batteries were actually involved.
So they're not even able to go inside of it. How do you fight the fire if you can't go inside?
You can see that there's some holes on the wall there. We were able to use unstaffed monitors and some of these hoses here. The fire engine is still connected into the fire suppression sprinkler system.
That's Mike Cornett. He's the fire captain for CAL FIRE, still working to keep the battery fire at this industrial storage facility in Otay Mesa safe. Robert Rizendi is the Alternative Energy Response Coordinator.
They're difficult to extinguish. They are a chemical reaction that's happening inside the battery, so it's not your typical fire. The first hazard that they pose is an explosive hazard because of hydrogen gas production, so that's really difficult. They produce oxygen, so we can't smother the fire like we can typically do. And the effort is to either try to cool the batteries down so they stop going into thermal runaway, which is that chemical reaction, or sometimes the best option is to just let them consume the fuel that's inside the battery, so basically let it burn.
And that is exactly what they're doing. 15 days after the fire broke out, evacuation orders and warnings went into effect originally to make sure other businesses in the industrial area aren't in danger. There aren't any homes nearby that were threatened, and the San Diego County of Environmental Quality came to check the air quality, giving firefighters who were wearing masks the all clear that the air outside the facility is safe. Those orders and warnings have expired, but Mike says,
we remain on scene for fire standby because we're cautiously optimistic that this incident is winding down, but there is still a potential that we could experience thermal runaway. It's kind of a hazardous situation for us because there's batteries involved, there's hazardous materials involved. So we took a real cautious approach, made sure that we monitored the atmosphere and kept the public and our firefighters safe.
Oh my gosh. I mean, we've gone on through all this hard work to change accounts, and now we have another card hacked.
Hackers strike again. A retired couple was sharing their story of being hacked when they got another fraud alert from another bank. The couple says they've been fighting Wells Fargo to get their money back after hackers tried to steal $50,000.
CBS 8's Abby Black is live in Santee working for you to see if we can help that couple out. Abby.
Carlo and Kirsten, the Scotts say that they've been banking with the Wells Fargo for nearly 30 years. They had their personal and small business accounts here, and they never had any trouble until this year when they noticed that someone tried to steal $50,000 from their accounts. That was in January, and they say Wells Fargo still has not refunded them the money. We're working for you in hopes to change that.
Helping us to
Ron and Jan Scott are big believers in forgiveness.
Amen.
And they're hoping for forgiveness from Wells Fargo after scammers hacked into their online accounts and tried to steal $50,000.
Once they hacked our email name and our password, they were able to go directly into our account and start working on it.
Ron Scott takes us back to January 9th when he got a call from his wife, Jan.
She said, "Did you transfer $19,000 out of the bank account?" And I told her, no way.
Hackers moved $50,000 from Jan's personal Wells Fargo accounts to Ron's web development small business account, RS Concepts Consulting in Lakeside. The hackers then tried to funnel the money into two $25,000 transactions.
If you have that many accounts where large withdrawals are made instantaneously, the system should be refusing all of them.
The system did deny $20,000, but that still leaves the Scotts $30,000 in the hole, and that doesn't include fees.
$1,184.
This happened in January. The sheriffs investigated and confirmed with CBS this is fraud. They told the Scotts that the hackers are linked to another Wells Fargo customer in Pennsylvania.
Is a fraud risk.
The Scotts say that the sheriff's department and the local Wells Fargo branch have helped, but the bank's fraud department has not.
We're denying your claim.
I called Wells Fargo for comment, but was told that they would not respond until more research was done on this case.
Us helping them out to get.
Ron says that he bears some responsibility in not having strong password protection, but believes Wells Fargo should be on the hook for the cyber breach.
We're sitting in front of you hoping that you can help us to convince Wells Fargo's fraud department to replace our monies. They are as or more responsible than we are.
We're continuing to work for you and for the Scott family. As soon as we hear back from Wells Fargo, we will keep you updated. Meanwhile, the Scotts say that they've now added a two-factor authentication, so that can help add an extra layer of protection. And remember, if you receive a fraud alert via whether it be your phone call or a text message or an email, independently confirm it with a credit card company or the bank. Remember, you saw in the beginning of the story when the Scotts, while I was there interviewing them, they had received a fraud alert that someone someone spent $300 on their new debit card from another bank that was not Wells Fargo. So again, someone tried to steal $300 and they were able to confirm that, and this was with a separate bank. They say before all of this hacking stuff happened, they'd never had a problem with a scammer or fraud.
Scary stuff. What a terrible trial for them to go through.
Absolutely.
Right now, we're monitoring a wildfire that broke out earlier today in East County.
Yeah, we'll have the latest updates on that fire coming up for you next.
And a local nonprofit is celebrating a major milestone, 12 million meals served.
We had afternoon sunshine even along the coast earlier today, but this is the view right now from our Mount Soledad cam. Cloud cover's rolling right back in with that marine layer. But what does Friday hold? All those details are coming up.